This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
Welcome back to the Neurosurgery Podcast. We are getting to the close of the AANS meeting here in San Antonio, so I managed to just borrow a couple minutes from Mr. Brett Wall. Brett Wall is the president of MEDTRONIC, one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. Brett, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making a little bit of time. I know how valuable your time is. So this is a podcast listened to mostly by neurosurgeons, right?
Sure.
So could you just introduce yourself? A lot of people know who you are, but tell us where you're from, what your background is.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no worries. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and I got into med tech kind of by accident. I was working with a large company you all know called Coca-Cola. And in
Georgia.
Yeah, so you know this. So in 1989, during the World Series where the earthquake was, our division was sold, and all of us lost our job. And that experience was the best thing that ever happened to me because it led me into med device. And the next job I took was with a company called Bard, which was a urology company.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I was in med device, and so I started there, and then over time joined some startups, and the startup on the neuro field was in neurovascular.
Wow.
And that's where I got started, MTI EV3, and then ultimately that was acquired by MEDTRONIC.
You know, it's so interesting because they always talk about the Chinese word for chaos is the same one for opportunity.
Yes.
And people just look at the negative like, oh my God, we just got laid off. But now it opened a whole new window.
I probably wouldn't have considered it, except somebody that knew me, who I worked for at Coca-Cola, was contacted by a med device company, and he said, "No, I'm too late in my career, but you should talk to this guy."
Yeah.
And so I tracked him down years later and thanked him because I said, "You really changed my life."
Wow. So I want to, we could talk about anything, right? But I
Sure.
want to go down a bit of a rabbit hole because you're so broad and Medtronic's such a big company. I want to ask you about this concept because, and I've been guilty of this. I'll say, surgeons are like, these big companies, Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, Stryker, big healthcare companies, they're like battleships, right?
Sure.
And they seem to move so slow and they're overburdened and they don't seem to want to take any risk or do anything new or interesting. But you were telling me like that's actually not the case, right?
I don't think it has to be the case. Let's put it that way. I think that there are always examples where we're slower because we're so large and so much is, you have to get a lot of people on board sometimes to move. But then there's things that are opportunity, and one of the things I try to do from my startup experience is try to help people in the company. You can take a risk, and a risk you take inside of our company. As long as you do the right thing and try to do it with the right intent and are ethical, you're not going to sink the company. Right. You'll just make a mistake, and we'll learn from that, and we'll move on. And so part of that is trying to teach that in a way that people can. You have to role model it. You have to do it yourself. And we talked a little bit last night about some of those examples, about how you can do that.
I want to go down one of them because it was so compelling to me. I mean, now it's like, just a thing, like people get thrombectomies, right?
Sure,
and before that era, this has saved tens of thousands of people's lives, probably, is my guess. I'm a spine surgeon, but I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's more than that.
More, okay. Okay, so spine is feeling smaller and smaller.
No, but stroke is a very common problem. It happens to everybody. Probably listening to this podcast knows somebody or has a relative that's had a stroke.
Like one of the top killers in America.
Exactly.
Right? So you were telling me this issue about like when you were exploring this arena, how you analyzed it personally, right?
Yeah,
before we knew it would work.
Yeah, I had a great staff. I mean, what happened with trials like IMS3, they did us a great service because they showed that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you tell?
International Management of Stroke 3, which was a study that really showed futility, and this published in 2013.
So thrombectomy for stroke?
Yeah, thrombectomy for stroke was, showed futility, and basically saying that it wasn't unsafe to do the procedure, but there was no discernible benefit, from the standard of care, which was intravenous TPA.
So to put it in lay terms, right?
Yeah.
Taking a blood clot that's blocking blood flow to the brain out emergently, within the first hour or two, wasn't something that would be advised in general because it didn't work according to this trial.
Exactly. Okay. And then there was a few other trials that were published concurrently that confirmed that. And then what happened was, stroke neurology said, okay, the data's not there. And and we probably shouldn't do this. And what was happening is we had these approved products on the market, but the data wasn't pulling up, and so you can imagine that there's a slow decline in the business, and ultimately people probably won't pay for it, and you're not going to get referred, and it's just not going to happen.
Correct.
But what was interesting about those trials, when we looked into those trials, we noticed a couple of things. One, we noticed that about a quarter of the patients had no confirmation of stroke that were enrolled in the trial.
Oh, because it's so emergent.
Yeah, and the imaging data wasn't there, and so it might have been something else. The second thing was that we realized that they were using technology that was older technology, maybe not the current technology. And then third, of the centers that we knew that were involved, there was probably some other centers that should have been involved as well, that they had expertise in this particular area. And then what was really compelling is we looked at the data and the subsets of the data, one or two or three of these subsets, one patient flipping from one outcome to the other would have been a statistically significant shift, and then the trial would have been positive.
Wow.
And
they were powered correctly.
Yeah, it was powered correctly. It was all
yeah.
fine. But when we looked at that, we said, well, gosh, we need to conduct trials here. We need to confirm with imaging that we actually have a stroke. We need to pick a cohort of those patients that we think could benefit, from this. Let's get, a group of people involved that have experience in this, and then let's, and then let's, conduct the trial and
another trial.
And do the work. So we basically funded 4 more trials.
What were they called?
Swift Prime,
Revascat.
Okay. Extend IA, and on the spot I'm forgetting the fourth one.
For our listeners who don't know, each one of these trials, I'm going to guess, cost $10 to $100 million.
Well, it was in the tens of millions of dollars to do this, and so what had happened is people would talk to me and they'd say, oh my gosh, this is a tremendous risk you're taking. But when you really think about risk, I thought there's only 3 outcomes. The first outcome is you do nothing. Well, that's just a slow descent, and eventually you don't get referred anymore, and people stop paying for it, and so all these potential people don't get help. And then the other outcome, you run the trials, and it's kind of binary. Either they work or they don't work. And if they don't work, it's just a faster version of not doing anything, and then it's not fruitful, so you just go off and you do something else. But what people don't spend their time on thinking is, what if it works? And the fact that it worked, and it did work. All the trials stopped early. All of the trials showed a significant benefit, so much so that it was no longer ethical to randomize.
So you stopped early?
We stopped early, every single trial. Stopped early.
Can I put this in context?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are younger, and they just assume the world is as it is today.
Yeah.
They don't know what it was before, right?
Yeah.
And so you as a corporate leader are making a decision on something like $100 million investment, something in that range. So 9-figure investment for even a company like Medtronic. That's not a small
lot of money.
undertaking, right? And if this doesn't go your way, it could end up being that there's a new leader, right? Right? I mean, it could, right? That happens. I read Wall Street Journal.
It does. Yeah.
But you had the confidence, and I'm not saying it was just you. I know you're too humble to say that, but I'll say it. You had the vision and the analysis of the data that said, look, this is going to matter maybe, and doing this is going to make it, and it has made a difference for, I said tens of thousands, probably more than that, people in the world, right?
Yeah. It has.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to a choice that you're making. I don't have any grand knowledge that no one else has. I don't have that, but I do think when you think about the privilege to be in this space and the opportunity that you have is to make a difference. And in order to make a difference, the other side of that coin is risk. And then you have to assume that risk and engage in it and enjoy it, actually. And what I always found was and I still am today, I'm happiest when I'm on the edge of that capability where we don't necessarily know the outcome. There's ambiguity there, but there's a pathway to go do it. And with our employees and the great people that constructed these trials and worked with, healthcare practitioners, physicians, leaders, neurosurgeons to construct these trials, neurologists, everybody, what I always told them is, if we get this right, where we'll end up when you retire, you'll be able to look back in your career and say, I contributed my sliver of the pie, to something that actually made society better. And not too many people get to say that.
Yes.
All work's honorable. I come from a working class family. All work's honorable in my family. But that in and of itself is something you should hold on to, because that's a life well lived if you get to do that. So I don't look at it as being risky. And if it ends my career or whatever, I also think that there's a lot of other things to go do that would be pretty exciting, so I didn't worry about that. I was thinking more about the outcome.
I love this message because I have the opportunity in my role, not as a neurosurgeon per se, but in organized medicine, to speak to a lot of meet a lot of folks like you who are decision makers, who are in a position of power. And sometimes people think, wow, these companies are just basically profit oriented on the short term, on the shareholder dividends and share price and all this. But the reality is, I think in healthcare, right, there is this higher ethos. Sam Altman, right, is dealing with all this chaos right now, right, as we record, and people are saying, well, this guy, a lot of people don't like his stand, right? Yeah. It's controversial, but I feel like I'm looking around the exhibit hall, all your competitors, their leaders, they share by and large this ethos that's really about there is something that we're going to do that's going to matter for people. Maybe myself. Yeah, and I'll tell you, in the spine world, we have the same problem. There's always trials showing, this surgery doesn't work for this. And it's like, well, wait a minute, for what? Redefine what you're trying to fix, right? Which is what you did.
Well, I think in the spine world, it's really simple because, we have a large spine company inside neurosciences. And I think when I talk to teams and people, and frankly, I look out here around the exhibit hall, I think everyone is trying to make this better, to have a better outcome, to create new technology that does that, to create an ecosystem where we can plan that surgery, you can operate in real time, you can check your results in real time to see that you're getting the correction that you want, and what's exciting about it is incorporating everybody around that to bring what I would call personalization of that patient experience, but doing it at scale.
Yeah.
So everyone's a little different, right? So being able to do what that patient needs, but then scale it broadly so it's available to more people, and that's a really worthy thing to take on particularly in spine, where so many people suffer, and being able to do this work is really great.
So I want to pivot because Medtronic's such a giant house, right? Yeah. And of course I'm in the spine world.
Sure.
But actually, if you took all these companies, you say, okay, what is Medtronic's core, and not that there's only one core, but what is its origin, what is its core? I think it's an electrical engineering company. It's a company that from its beginning was very interested in the concept of energy and electricity in the body through cardiac, right?
Yes.
And neurostim.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So tell us what's happening now in the neurostim world, because that's really where you guys are the big 800-pound gorilla.
Well, I think the company's found it's really alleviated in a very simple, or it's discussed in a very simple phrase. Our founder, Earl Bakken, created our mission, and the mission hasn't changed in over the 60 years that he wrote it. It's the same. And one word changed, but other than that, it's the same. And basically, it's summed up: we alleviate pain, we restore health, and we extend life. Those are the three things that we focus on at Medtronic, and then we use what we believe are our abilities, and our engineering abilities and capabilities to go do that. And so if I look at neuromodulation, there's some really interesting areas in neuromodulation happening right now. If I look in the past, it was an absolute miracle that you could stimulate the subthalamic nucleus and you could have a Parkinson's patient, have symptom relief. And when I show people this, I go back to my university and I speak to the business school, and I'll show them a Parkinson's patient on and off, and people are slack-jawed. It's like magic. And I can't remember if that was Isaac Asimov or somebody who said, like, if the technology is advanced enough, it will appear to the layperson as magic.
Correct.
And that's exactly what it looks like. But what was interesting about that is we didn't really understand if we were delivering enough energy, not enough energy, if the algorithm was right or that. So the engineering team put together technology that allows us to close the loop in sense.
So explain that. What do you mean by closing a loop?
So in real time, we're receiving signals from the brain that's informing what this neural stimulation should be. And we're actually at the edge. So the device implanted at the edge is now able to make adjustments, based on
Live.
if you're operating, within parameters, because we found through this original initiative, back 20 some years ago, it was discovered you can measure this and you can understand it.
Most people think of these stimulators with the battery generating, or the pulse generating devices as a neurostimulator, but you're saying it's also a neurosensor.
Yes,
and a
absolutely.
processing device.
Absolutely, and instead of, think about it this way, I think in the past, we had a problem. I always think about it this way, we were cold. So we found the ability to start a fire.
Right.
And that kept us comfortable. The only problem was when the seasons changed and all we had was a fire, it's pretty uncomfortable when it's 100 degrees outside and you have a raging fire.
Right.
What we were able to do is invent a thermostat for the brain. And so this thermostat, samples information, and then it feeds back into the device, and it might even say, you've stimulated too much. In this particular case, levodopa has made its arrival, and you're stimulating too much, back it off, or shut it down completely. Or at night when you're asleep and under REM sleep, you might not have some of these symptoms. We're going to detect that, and we're going to shut it down.
So there's an afferent and an efferent loop, part of the loop.
Yeah.
And I assume it varies by patient, and it varies by the time or situation, right?
Every patient is very different, and so what I mentioned about spine and the ecosystem we're building there is very similar to the ecosystem we're building here. What we want to be able to do is deliver therapies that are very personalized, but then do it at scale, because all of us are different, and all of us have different capabilities and different outcomes. We're similar, but we're different. So it's kind of different than population health, where you're looking at, if I put a vaccine out there, I'm going to get some, level here. What we're trying to do is say, here's a therapy that works, but now let's actually listen to that patient's specific condition and make the adjustments to make their experience better.
And I imagine that data, if collected and stored, is immensely informative.
I think what we're seeing is that data can help us learn models and inform what's next. In spine, we're doing that with our planning software and technology. What we're actually able to do now is see that data and then understand, okay, have we seen patients like this before? What was the outcome with those patients before? Is that an outcome that we prefer? Is it not an outcome we prefer? It gives you some guidance. So there's the ability to train. Like, the data is very valuable now, because you can train on that data and learn on that data. And eventually, at some point in the future, I imagine most of these models will be synthetic. You'll be able to create the models yourself. But the data right now, that's very valuable to be able to do that. So
yeah, I mean, it's been stunning to see the computational power being not weaponized, but being the enabler to deeper understanding that probably wouldn't be possible just through traditional scientific method, right?
It's I mean, it's a whole new world, and I think part of our challenge in medtech is we've been this kind of regulated market, and which is fine. We appreciate that, and we think a regulated market's good because it ensures safety and good products out there. But technology is coming into this space at such a pace that I think we're going to have to change a little bit of how we think and how we operate in order to accommodate that. And we heard the commissioner here, the FDA commissioner, say that if we're doing something autonomous, taking the surgeon out of the loop or something, okay, well, that's something that regulation will be involved in. But then I think they're thinking about it kind of creatively, if it's decision support or other types of information that will help you make a decision, where you're still, the control in the loop, you're still making those. So I think it's an interesting time to be in this space and to provide models and different technology, to help with this. I think there's going to be a wonderful time of advancement here that'll be fun to be around.
Well, Brett, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a ton of meetings today, but thank you for sharing a little bit of your life and your journey with us. I think neurosurgeons around the world are excited to hear that. Industry partners, and not just Medtronic, all of your colleagues here in Exhibit Hall, they're all working in the right direction to give us the tools we need to confront the problems we face every day out there. So thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot. No, thanks so much, Mike. I really
Travel
appreciate
safely
it.
home, okay?
Thank you. All right, take care.